Are you looking to take the next step toward investing in commercial real estate but don't know where to go? CRE Central offers a comprehensive education and coaching platform designed to help you get started. Our online courses cover a wide range of topics, from the fundamentals to advanced strategies, ensuring you have the knowledge and skills needed to thrive in this competitive industry. As a member, you'll gain access to our exclusive online community and monthly group coaching calls, providing you with valuable networking opportunities and personalized guidance from experienced professionals. Whether you're a beginner or looking to take your career to the next level, CRE Central has the resources you need. Visit www.crecentral.com to learn more. Welcome back to the Commercial Real Estate Investor Podcast, live from the Cobble Group studios. And today, I am very honored and excited because I've got the one and only Bert Matthews in the studio here with me in Nashville. He's the CEO of the Mathews Company. He's also the principal and executive vice president of Colliers International. Very similar trajectories to what I would like to find in my career, because I started off as a broker, got into development. You kind of had a bit of a different approach, right?
I've been able to do it all, which is just so incredibly lucky for me.
That's what I love about this industry is there's so much opportunity in every aspect of it.
And that, you know, real estate, like everything, it's amazing all the different ways that you can make a living.
Right.
All you have to do is be creative, thoughtful, hardworking, and go at it, but 100 different ways.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think one thing that you and really your family, because y'all have been doing this for generations, is being community-centric, right? You've always put Nashville first in a lot of your developments, and you've done some pretty amazing things here in Nashville that I definitely want to talk about today. So one, the Trolley Barns.
Yep.
We'll get to that here in a bit. The Stallman building.
Yep.
Which I think is pretty incredible because that was the first time multifamily units had been delivered into downtown Nashville. And
we were the first
decades?
one in a decade.
Yeah.
There was one that was right before us, but before that, it was actually the zoning didn't allow residents in downtown Nashville.
I feel like a lot of people don't know that's why there's actually not. I mean, Memphis used to have more residential units downtown than Nashville did up until a few years ago.
Oh, without a doubt. There's a guy, Ferris Deep, who was the planning commissioner or planning director, who had an idea, said no parking and no residential, and that's how we'll build a dense core. He wasn't necessarily right, but at least he had a philosophy about it.
That's right. I mean, hey, if you're going to be wrong, you might as well go all in on it, right? It's funny to think about now these days. You know, there are so many cities that subscribe to that philosophy of no, let's keep downtown for work. Everybody else lives out in the suburbs, and you completely cut off this amazing walkability, neighborhood, community-oriented kind of cityscape that we used to have.
You know, it's really the Nashville Downtown Partnership really has helped shape the way that we look at our city for that reason, and they have done just an incredible job encouraging residents to move there, and it's made all the difference in the world.
I don't think there's any program like the Nashville Downtown Partnership across the United States. I mean, what they do is phenomenal. Can you kind of explain what NDP does?
Yes, so the Nashville Downtown Partnership is, the way it got started out is there's a bill, and all the owners in a particular neighborhood have to tax themselves, and that tax, which is 15 cents roughly, goes to fund all the operations of the Downtown Partnership. And it's more than $1 million a year, but it's on clean and safe, it's on advocacy, it's on advertising and recruiting people to come downtown, and it's just been transformative.
Yeah, I mean, they keep Broadway moving, right? That's the biggest thing. I know they do all sorts of attracting other people, but considering the amount of tourists that are down on Broadway every weekend, they keep it remarkably clean.
They do, and that's that was really the whole idea. At that long ago, Nashville downtown did not feel clean and safe, and so they took those as those two priorities to make it happen. And they're still doing that, and it is it's what allowed our downtown to be able to do what it's become today.
Yeah, I think it's pretty phenomenal. So take us back before the Mathews Company. I believe it was 1980. You graduated from Harvard.
Yeah, that small school outside of Boston.
That tiny little school?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So what, did you come right back to Nashville?
So let's see, I graduated from business school in 1980, came back and worked for my father for a couple of years. A friend of mine was running for Congress, got elected. He asked me to be his first chief of staff, Jim Cooper.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, and so I went to my father and I said, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, so I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. and work for Jim for a couple of years. And my father said, well, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Why do you get to leave and I have to stay?
Yeah.
So I did that for a couple of years, came back here, my brother and I both, in 1984, and we've been doing it ever since.
That's hilarious. So your dad was already in construction and development.
My grandfather was in construction. My father got into construction and development, and my brother and I, he did construction and I did the real estate side of things.
So did you think that you'd be kind of getting into the family business? Because there's this huge dichotomy. I did not think that I was going to do that at all, and here we are today. I'm in real estate.
So I would tell you that whether it was a square peg in a round hole or whatever, my parents just pounded me into doing that. But what's really interesting is in 1992, 89, 92, we saw a real estate depression that I've never seen in my entire life. And my father was in his 50s and said, I've never seen anything like that. And it was at that time that I had the chance to choose whether I stayed in the business. And I decided to, and I've loved it ever since.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy working in a family company. So I'm sure you have a number of war stories you could share with us about that.
So my grandfather was so hard on my father that my father made it easy on my brother and I.
That's nice.
And I've got a lot of confidence in my brother, so he and I were partners up until a couple of years ago, and he's really great in that regard.
That's wonderful. So you take over the Mathews Company in the 90s.
Yeah, so started doing that. Because the real estate market was so bad, many of the companies that really got started, we became a service provider.
Okay.
So we leased properties, managed properties, and tried to hold on to whatever else we could, but we were a service provider a long time. And then gradually got back into the development business. In 1987, we had $100 million of real estate under development, and in 1989, we had zero.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was all because of the recession.
Yep.
Were those properties that y'all gave back to the bank? Was it something y'all finished and then you were done? We were not doing any
some
other
our partners took on, some we kept, some we worked out with banks over time. But you really learn. When things are going great, it's a lot of fun, but that doesn't mean you're learning anything.
That's right.
So, you learn who your friends are. You learn who to trust. When things are really tough in a room, you really figure out who's running for the door and who's going to sit there beside you.
That's right. I mean, money's a weird thing, right? People, their personalities completely change when money's on the line. And, I've got friends that'll stay there in the foxhole with me and we'll fight this out till the end. And I've got others that I've seen just turn tail and run.
I've got two guys that I was really, it wasn't fortunate. Well, the deal ended up working just great, but I was in a deal about 20 years ago with Rich Riebling and Charles Robert Bone, two famous Nashvillians now. Back then, not so much. And we had a really difficult issue we had to grapple with. 3 of us stayed in the room. 3 of us worked it out. 3 of us made it happen. We sold the property 3 or 4 years later, did really well for ourselves and our investors. But those guys were in the room with us as we were working through some tough times. And so I'll buy them a beer anytime.
Yeah, I bet. It's great having friends like that. So what lessons did you take away from that recession, 87 to 92-ish, that helped you get through 2008?
Probably the best one was they won't kill you.
That's a pretty good one.
You know, as embarrassing, as awful, as difficult, as hard as those kind of things can be, it really, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, the market comes back. It is a philosophy that, Tyler, it's really about how far in advance you can see. So when things are going great, you can run a 10-year pro forma, and it just makes a lot of sense.
And we're exiting at 4 caps.
Yeah, right. So when things are difficult, like in 2008 and 9, your vision shortened from 10 years to 2 years to 1 year to 6 months, because you're trying to figure out what's really going to happen, and you really don't know. So during these difficult times, like right now, what are interest rates going to do? How do they make a difference? How do we figure out what's going to happen? Your clarity is much shorter today than it was 2 years ago when interest rates were 2% and money didn't cost anything.
What do you think is possibly more beneficial as a commercial real estate investor, to be a little more short-sighted or to be longer-sighted?
So it depends on where you are. In Nashville, Tennessee, my bet is Nashville, Tennessee, looking out 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I can't imagine a better place to be. There are ways that we could screw it up, and we've got a very special and unique place. But, man, what a great place to invest and to try to figure out what's going on and to make a difference with what you've got. So I think right now, no matter the clarity or the time frame, I'm betting Nashville long term.
I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, one thing that I've been thinking about here this week that I would love to do, and just go through the exercise, is take a map of Atlanta from the 1980s, compare it to Nashville, and then look at Atlanta today and see the potential growth of Nashville. Because everybody always says Nashville's the next Atlanta. I've been saying that for years, and most of it's been slang in terms of our traffic, which, unfortunately that's not wrong. But it really puts into perspective the potential growth the city could have, because you look on a map, there's a lot of green space in Nashville, a lot.
So let me tell you this. So this is not a thought that's original to me. Chief Operating Officer at Highwoods was giving a talk to Urban Land Institute, and he said, look, here is my sense of how cities grow. He said back in the 70s and 80s, when I was getting out of college, the hot cities were Dallas, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C. They, at that time, were all about 2 million people living there. Today, the hot cities are Nashville, Austin, Raleigh, Charlotte, all about 2 million people. And the thought is that those cities are ones where people they can understand it. They get the amenities of a really NFL city, if you will, and they can, in that 2 million people, they can get around. They know people. They can figure it out. And like us, we attracted more college graduates, I think, than virtually any other city in the country, because people want to be here, and that is just going to take things going. Your idea about Atlanta and how the growth happened, you can see it happening right now in Nashville as we go.
That's a really interesting take. I hadn't thought about that, but it's almost like that 18-hour city is the sweet spot to be, a supernova, right? Like Nashville is. And to be fair, that doesn't mean that Atlanta is not growing like it used to. It's just not the star child of every.
And its base is so big that a 2% growth is, an 8% growth in Nashville or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it makes a big. That's a huge difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah. Okay, so take us to the early 2000s, and how did you come across the Stallman? Like, how did that project come on your radar?
So let me tell a story first, and then I'll get there. But the Stallman building was designed by a hero of mine. His name is James Edwin Ruthven Carpenter, and James Carpenter was the first formally educated architect in the state of Tennessee. Was educated at l'École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, came back and started building office buildings around the South. Jacksonville, Mobile, and Nashville all have big buildings like that he designed.
Wow.
And when he finished with the Hermitage Hotel that he did right after the Stallman, he moved to New York City, and basically he and one other guy started doing apartment buildings in New York City along Park Avenue and Fifth Avenue. So all those buildings on the Upper East Side and around in New York are done by the guy that did the Stallman building, the Hermitage Hotel, and grew up in Columbia, Tennessee.
Not bad for a country boy from Tennessee.
Isn't that just amazing? And
Wow.
he was, so the thing is, he was sued in 1927 in New York by the New York Zoning or Planning Commission because he was taking these beautiful homes, tearing them down, and building apartment buildings on them. Can you,
That's wild.
it's just wild. And so people wanted to live on Park Avenue. There were only probably 4 or 5 houses in a block. Well, after he got finished with it, there were 3 or 4 buildings on a block going 9 stories. And if you walk down Park Avenue, you can see replicas of the Stallman building, kind of how he designed them that's there. So he then went and did the Lincoln building about the same time they were building the Empire State Building. Depression comes. Life is really hard. And he ends up dying at his desk on a Sunday from a heart attack, just working away.
Doesn't sound like the worst way to go for somebody that loves their job.
But isn't that incredible?
Yeah, that's
so
wild. It's really interesting to think about how unsophisticated zoning and codes laws were back in the day, to where the city has no other repercussion but to sue you for building a tower.
And I'm sure that he was doing. It probably wasn't
Right.
exactly what they were wanting
Not
for their
completely above
city.
board.
Or the thing that I found forever is that people just they know what they see, but not what it can be.
Right.
And so when we're in New York, you love walking down Park Avenue. It's this place that is exactly what you think of in New York, and yet, 100 years ago, it was horse-drawn carriages and homes for the ultra-wealthy. Isn't that just amazing?
That's crazy.
All right, so
Now it's so idyllic.
So the Stallman building was owned by the city. One more Stallman building story. So it's got an atrium in the middle of it. And when we were looking at the building, trying to figure out what to do, I came across an ad in the newspaper. And what that ad said is, come have your office in the Stallman building. It's 10 degrees cooler here than it is outside. And the reason was you could open your outside window, the 2 transoms, and the window on the atrium, and it would act like a chimney. But I'm thinking, God, it's 95 degrees outside in the summer, no air conditioning. It's 10 degrees cooler, and you got 500 people sitting side by side.
gosh.
It's like, oh.
I wouldn't be able to wear a button down to that office.
Well, and you had to.
Right. Because it used to be a bank, right? Or there was a bank in there at one point?
There was a bank in there at one point. It was the Stallman building for the Stallman family that owned the Nashville Banner. Very wealthy family. The head of it used to be Mr. Stallman was the head of the Vanderbilt Board of Trust during the racial riots of the 60s. He's the one that, helped shut down, throw people out. Yeah, it's just, anyway.
So you've got a bunch of journalists in there smoking cigarettes, typing away on typewriters. I mean, it's sweating at 85 degrees.
Right.
That's wild.
What a mess.
Yeah, what a mess.
So the city went out for a bid. That bid was to come up with so the city owned the Stallman building. They came up with a plan. They said has to be 20% affordable for 5 years, and you tell us what it's worth. So we bid to turn it into an apartment building, and so I don't know. We just did it.
How radical of a plan was that though at the time to turn that into an apartment?
If I'm not mistaken, MDHA, Bill Purcell was mayor. They may have said they wanted it residential, but our original plan was to turn it one particular way, where you were going to walk around in the atrium and the units were going to go from the atrium out. Took it to the historic folks and said, no, you're not. You're going to have them all around the, you're going to follow the existing corridor in the building. So we had units that all of a sudden went from, front door on the atrium, everybody has a window, to most everybody's got a window, but a bunch of units are sitting around the atrium.
That's so interesting.
Isn't that cool
to think about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So when you delivered the Stallman, what other residential buildings were there downtown at the time? Because I'm sure there was some historic that had been around for a while.
Tony had done the building.
Is that the Viridian?
No, the Viridian was much later. It's a building where DeAndrews is in the bottom of it.
Okay.
But it was a building that was built 10 years before, brand new, modern building. Mark Deutschman had done a couple of condominiums at the corner of Church and Third. There are a couple of condominiums that are still there. He was working on one on Church Street. So there were a few scattered here and there. We did the lofts at 160 above the El Spaghetti factory back then. That was 32 units. And we were really using that as a test case before we did the Stallman building.
I mean, that makes sense because you've got 30 units to – how many units did the Stallman have?
180 or something like that.
I mean, that's a lot of units to be delivering into, for all intents and purposes, what's considered a new market, right?
Well, so I didn't really think of it that way.
Okay.
The way that I thought of it, well, first of all, Nashville Downtown Partnership had just done a study of residential projects or residential densities in other cities. And we had fewer people living downtown than Knoxville. And I'm going like, come on, I mean, Knoxville's a great place, but there's no comparison. So I figured that 1% of the population of Nashville at that time was, I forget, 8. But anyway, it's 20, 30,000 people. I thought, 1% of the population would probably be willing to live in a treehouse or a cave. So why wouldn't they just come downtown just like they had in Birmingham and Knoxville and every other city in the South. So we were just behind the times.
I couldn't agree more, and appreciate you doing that because I lived in the lofts at 160 for quite some time. I was there.
Those were so cool.
They were really cool. I mean, I had a buddy that lived there, and when I was looking at finding a new apartment, he said, "You've got to check this. I've never seen anything like this in Nashville." And when I got off the elevator, when you walk into a building, right, from the street, it doesn't look anything special. You get on the elevator, you go upstairs, and you walk out into this 2-story atrium, open-air atrium, all brick, beautiful. I mean, that alone sold it. And then I walked into the unit and had a 2-story loft. I was like, yeah, but come on. You're not going to not sign a lease here. This is cool.
So Sieb Tuck designed those.
Okay.
He did a really magnificent job.
I mean, outstanding.
Really, really, really great.
I had never seen anything like that in Nashville at the time. That was really cool to see. If you're joining us live, you are welcome to jump in and ask some questions if you got anything for Bert. But we're going to continue this on. So, Stallman, then let's talk about Trolley Barns, because that is one of those MDHA projects that, honestly, completely transformed what became South Broadway, right? That wasn't really, I know it was Rolling Mill Hill, but South Broadway then started to kind of branch off of that, and you're doing a bunch of work over there today. But what did Rolling Mill Hill look like back in the day?
So, Rolling Mill Hill had been through, three different bids. So there was a bid that a developer out of Baltimore brought to it. They were going to do everything that was on top of the hill. They were going to do everything that is the Trolley Barns, and then the land that Ray Hensler's working on today. So it was all of that. And we were a partner with that guy, and we went to MDHA and said, we need a few tweaks. And he said, well, the guys that are bidding on you said you were going to come for a few tweaks, and so you're out of here.
No way.
Okay. Well, it was their land. They could figure it out. Another group bid on it. They weren't able to bring it to fruition. And so what Phil Ryan came up with, and I give him a lot of credit for this, is he said, okay, MDHA is going to be the developer, and we're going to take each parcel and sell it off to different developers or lease it to developers, and that way we can make sure we know what's happening each step of the way.
Kind of like master planning it.
Yeah, and so it was the city's land. They knew what they wanted, and this was a way for them to control the development as opposed to put, what would be a $400 million project on one developer. And that's what they did, and a really smart thing. When we got the Trolley Barns, it was another bid situation. We were lucky to do it. It was a project I worked on in 2009 and 10 and 11, back when there wasn't anything going on. So
there's nothing over there.
Yeah, there was nothing there, and great
you had
financial
the Music City
crisis.
Center, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah, well, you had that, and you had the great financial crisis at the same time. So there was no money, and the Trolley Barns, had Metro SWAT practicing in there. I mean, they were a mess. So we were lucky to win that bid and get started. The other, Louis Levine, who's now passed away, but was kind of the first and lead tenant into that. He had the Center for Nonprofit Management. City brought the Entrepreneur Center. Then they leased that direct to them. I remember talking to Max, and I thought the bigger building where Pinewood Social is today would be a great restaurant. And I must have taken 10, 15, 20 restaurateurs up there and said, look at this view, look at what this is going to be. This is going to be incredible. And all of them said,
Not a
"There's
chance.
no way." And I took Max and Benjamin up there, and they said, "Oh, this is perfect. We've got this idea, this bowling alley and the 24-hour or 18-hour space and all this." And I went, "Okay,
Cool.
yeah,
You guys got it.
yeah." So it worked out.
Yeah, it's so neat how that project turned out now, because you've got the Entrepreneur Center, you've got Pinewood Social, you've got a handful of other offices, and of course the Greenway's right there. And so looking at it today, you're like, well, yeah, it's a no-brainer. But back then, it wasn't. I mean, Max and Ben really,
There was nothing up there.
no.
There was literally nothing up there. But, you know, it had a great view, great buildings, and people had the confidence of walking in and saying, I can see myself, you know, in a building like this.
Right. So you've been around for a lot of change in Nashville. I mean, the last 10 years alone have been insane. What neighborhoods are you most excited about today?
Well, so I would tell you that things have really, you know, they were growing, but the last decade, the curve went like that. I mean, it's truly amazing when it just took off. You know, I don't know. I'm amazed at what has happened on Dickerson Road. I mean,
It's my favorite road.
yeah, and you've done a remarkable job, but oh my goodness.
I mean, it was one of those ones where back in 2018, I was same thing. I was begging developers to buy over here because back then I was just a broker, and I was like, "You look at the skyline. It's right. The skyline's right there. Come on, you've got some of the best interstate connectivity in the city." And everybody's like, "Yeah, but it's just not there yet."
Yeah.
I'm like, "But they're building $500,000 houses right there." Nah, it's not there yet. It's too early. And then, of course, it was too early until it was too late.
You know, Lower Broad was like that.
Right.
I mean, I lived downtown with a good friend of mine from 1976. I went away to graduate school and came back and lived for a couple of years. But Lower Broad was frightening. I mean, it was truly,
It was crime-ridden.
yeah, it was nasty.
No bachelorette parties would be going down.
No, but if they, yeah, it was pretty rough. But, you know, like you saw Dickerson Road and how it came to be, the same is true for Lower Broad. You know, Bill Boner, who was mayor before Phil Bredesen, spent a week on Lower Broad as a homeless person, as a way to attract attention.
What a stunt.
Yeah.
He was a very interesting character.
Character is a perfect way to describe him.
Yeah. Have you ever gone out and studied other markets and used that to help influence projects that you're developing? I mean, I know you probably have, but like, what markets would you be looking at?
So my father really did that more than I did, and as a kid, being able to follow along, I really value my time at ULI, Urban Land Institute. I think that
It's phenomenal.
is really great, and so I really use that as the crucible to learn from. But I can remember my father taking us to Larimer Square in Denver 40 years ago, saying this is what 2nd Avenue and Broadway are going to be like. And 40 years later, he was right.
It's crazy. I mean, that's how I kind of used to look at Austin. You know, I used to go to Austin 3, 4, 5 times a year. This is probably 5, 6, 7 years ago now. And I would look at it and I'm like, South Congress, that's Dickerson Pike. We're 15, 20 years behind,
Yeah.
but it could be there. And I think it helps a lot as you're trying to visualize these things, because It's like when that guy broke the 4-minute mile,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden everybody started breaking the 4-minute mile. Like, you just got to see that it's possible, and then of course everybody can start doing it.
So here is one thing. You just remind me. You're keeping track of time, and I'm not. I'm just telling stories. But I do want to talk about the real estate folks' responsibility to the community they're creating.
Let's do it.
I think that's the most important thing. So I really think that there are a couple of kind of rules that I've kind of kept in my head. One of them is you want a city where your children or grandchildren will come back to live. So if you can create an environment where people want to be, where not the tourists that are coming in, but really the people that are the residents in your community, that they enjoy it. So like you think of 12 South, you
Right.
think of pieces of Germantown, you think of Dickerson Road and the
5
food
Points.
that's going on, 5 Points. You create these environments that we want to live, the people that live here want to do. So I think that's a really interesting rule. The other thing is that we as developers have a responsibility for creating a built environment that's going to last for a long period of time. You and I are so lucky to be here to do buildings or, renovate or build buildings that are going to be around for 100 years. Think about the Stallman. 1907
Right.
is when it was opened. We renovated it in 2012. It's got another 100-year life. That part of the built environment is incredibly important. So all this, as we're building things, you got to make a living, but you got to build it in a way that is important about building the community, the city that we're going to have. That's why this transit vote is absolutely critical.
Crucial.
We've got to build the infrastructure that we need. They're just, real estate guys need to be involved in their community, making a difference, because that's the responsibility that comes with bringing folks here, building their homes, building their offices where they're going to shop. We've got a huge responsibility to be able to do that correctly.
I completely agree. I mean, it's one of those things that you don't realize the impact. If you're not in commercial real estate development, you don't realize the impact that the built environment has on you on a day-to-day basis. But even the way that buildings like Vancouver, for example, in my opinion, one of the best examples of a skyline design in the world, because they were very intentional about making sure that none of the buildings blocked the mountain views.
Right.
I mean, just the forethought there to keep the environment around you so that you know that you're still in the mountains is pretty amazing. And I would love to see Nashville have more of that. I do have one thing that I want to ask you, though.
Sure.
So we did that with the wash, right? That's
Yeah.
a 6-bay car wash we converted into 5 micro restaurants and a bar.
Been there.
And awesome. Yeah.
And you won a ULI award for
we
it.
did. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It was. I couldn't believe that.
Isn't that great, though?
It was a tiny little project. But that's the
and
thing. You
those
can have-
people knew what they were looking at.
Right. That's right. You can have an outsized impact with these smaller neighborhood projects. And that's what I'm going to dedicate my life to, right? It's just doing deals like that. The issue that I have, though, it's a smaller project, but it's too big for me to do on my own, right? So we've got to go raise capital. We have to bring in debt. And lenders are typically unbelievably conservative when it comes to deals like that. So fortunately, I had a partner in that deal that had an incredible relationship with a local bank. So we were able to secure the debt. But we've tried doing 2 other versions of that, where we went to 150 lenders on one and couldn't get anybody to say yes.
Was it recent?
This was a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Okay.
So not recent. This was kind of back when everything was still booming. And the thing that blew me away, we had executed LOIs on all but like 2 spaces for one of these developments that we were doing. The thing that blew me away was one of the lenders said to us, if this was a Dollar General, we would give you the financing yesterday. And that broke my heart, because I was like, that's exactly what I don't ever want to build.
Yeah.
How do you go about, how do you reconcile that? Like, how do you go about, because I know I'm not the only one that's out there that's dealing with that, because banks look at it and they go, we want a credit tenant, or we want you to have such a massive balance sheet that, I mean, I don't know. It's this weird, maybe I'm just in a weird spot right now.
No, I think that the other thing that you might think about is you've got such a following, being able to lower that, just raising more equity, especially now in these financial markets.
Come in with like 50% instead of 30.
Yeah, that's really, because I'm not seeing much debt over 50 or 60% today.
It's tough to make anything make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. But I think that's the only way that you're able to beat those guys, or find the partner that's going to grab too much for providing the,
Yeah, that's a tough thing, because you don't want to bring in like a mezz debt lender or a predatory equity guy that wants pref equity, and they really actually just want to take the project.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So it's a tough balance, man. So if you were getting started in commercial real estate today, what would your day-to-day look like? What would your first moves be? I mean, how would you go about building up the success that you've seen so far in your life?
So I would tell you that it's a matter of covering your overhead. So the earlier that you start, the micro units that we're doing, people have their life in their car. So they're basically, because there's no room for them to have any furniture and stuff.
Right.
So figuring out how you're going to eat day to day is the first kind of piece. And then finding out after that really what place, turns you on that you're working on. So what you've found is, because you're a really good broker, you were able to figure out how to, make something happen, that was different. So whether you're an architect, an engineer, a broker, a builder, a banker, you're going to find how you eat day to day and then make that next jump. But you got to have enough market experience to be able to really figure it out. So is it, renovating a house? Is it, what are the different things that you're going to be able to do? It's really a matter of how you're going to begin to step into it. But I think that it's not hard to get started in that way. I was really lucky. I mean, my father was in the business before me. I had a great education. I'd worked for banks and a whole bunch of things, so that when I got started, I had a way to begin to climb my way through. But there are a lot of those opportunities that are out there.
Yeah. I mean, give yourself credit, though. You worked a lot and did some amazing things with what you were given.
Thank you. I mean, thank you.
Yeah. So what's next? What's next for the Mathews Company? What's next for Bert Matthews?
So I'm figuring out a way to be able to create, for the properties that we own, a way for them to, Jody Moody, who works for me, he's
awesome.
He's a great guy, right?
He's a really good
So
dude.
as I spend less and less time there, he can take and run and manage that in a way that he benefits from, and so does our family. So that's, I'm really lucky. My grandfather was 94 years old and still coming into the office. My father, until he got sick, was always coming into the office. But, I mean, my grandfather played golf all the time. My father loved to travel all the time. So, real estate is one of those great things. And now with Zoom and with this and that, there are just a bunch of ways that you can figure out how to live an incredibly full life.
I love it. Well, Bert, if anybody listening wants to get a hold of you, they want to learn more about the Mathews Company or Colliers, where can they find you?
Bert, B-E-R-T Matthews, M-A-T, one T in Matthews, H-E-W-S at Colliers.com.
Easy enough. Bert, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Are you looking to take the next step toward investing in commercial real estate but don't know where to go? CRE Central offers a comprehensive education and coaching platform designed to help you get started. Our online courses cover a wide range of topics, from the fundamentals to advanced strategies, ensuring you have the knowledge and skills needed to thrive in this competitive industry. As a member, you'll gain access to our exclusive online community and monthly group coaching calls, providing you with valuable networking opportunities and personalized guidance from experienced professionals. Whether you're a beginner or looking to take your career to the next level, CRE Central has the resources you need. Visit www.crecentral.com to learn more.